Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we're going to be tackling this rear differential cover. Notice that on the left side we have some, I wouldn't call it a leak as much as maybe it's seeping, and then you may notice where I installed my breather tube, it's also seeping there, so I'm going to tighten that up. But I've got the ARB cover, a gasket, and the oil. Let's get started. So I had to order a few different things for this differential cover install, one of which is the lube blocker gasket. This is the one you'll want to order. I just ordered it straight from Lube Blocker. Next is the gear oil. I went with what the manufacturer is recommending, the 75 weight 90. I initially had purchased the 75 weight 140, but you can see I took it back to O'Reilly's and picked up the 75 weight 90. I saw a bunch of people doing the 140 install. I don't think it makes a huge difference, but this is what they recommend. I know if I took this into service, Nissan's not going to test the oil and say, oh, you voided warranty because we can tell this is 140. I don't think it's going to make that huge of a difference. I just want to follow their specs. There's a few things I feel like I know more than engineers. This is not one of them, so just going with what they recommend. Now, as I say that, the gasket that they put on, or the seal, rather, for the differential locker is not great. So the engineer screwed up there, but I'm really impressed with this ARB cover. So I actually ordered mine from Z1. I had a few other purchases I wanted to make from them, and since they had the cover, I just went ahead and threw it in the cart. It's got some hardware, got the dipstick, drain plug. Here's the cover. It is substantial, nice and heavy. And this is the one that will fit the Gen 3 Nissan Frontier. Something I was worried about was if this was going to come with this part. So this is actually a bracket that gets mounted somewhere up here to attach our brake line to, that travels above the differential. I could not tell from the product description at Z1 if this actually came with it, and so I was worried that I was going to have to order this single part from the ARB site. But I can verify that if you order the one from Z1, it's going to come with this brake line bracket. And let's get this put on. Okay, so the first thing I did was lower the spare tire and remove it. That will give me a lot more room to work beneath the truck behind the rear differential. Okay, so now you can get a really close-up look at what we're talking about here. So all this leaking, seepage, and then you can see the seal that they use is just poking out the bottom here in a few spots. So just not a very good seal from the factory. And then right there where I did my breather tube, you can see there's some leakage there. So I just need to tighten that with a wrench. But the first thing I'm going to do is remove all these bolts. I think eventually I'm going to have to remove the sway bar because there's some bolts down here that are going to be tough to get if it stays put. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is remove these 13mm bolts all the way around. And these bottom ones are going to be tougher to get because of the sway bar. So I think what I can do is remove the sway bar here on either side and then just fold it down, and then I can access all the bolts. So right now I'm removing this brake line bolt. Okay, so you can see it's already dripping out at the bottom. It's still a little tough to pull off, so the seal is nice up here, just not great down here. Nope, that's one way to do it. Okay, so that's what the inside of our rear differential looks like. So I'm going to get here and clean up some of these, some of this residue here, because we want a tight seal for that next gasket. So I'm going to go work on the new cover and make sure that I've got a good idea of how this is going on with the gasket. I'm going to let this finish draining and then come back and clean all this up. So here's the old differential, here's the new ARB differential. If you notice on the old one, you can kind of see how it's a little lighter down here. That's not just the glare from the old oil, but there's actually a distinct line where there was the oil level. Notice it's right below the fill cap, and so I'm trying to make sure that I don't overfill or underfill this new differential cover. So what I'm doing is just lining them up as best I can horizontally. Then I'm just going to use a straight edge, kind of like just like a tape measure, and when I extend this fill line over here, it comes to right above this line. Now, to determine how much oil to put in here, I've loosened up the dipstick, because when I'm checking this oil level, I'm not going to be screwing this dipstick all the way back down every single time. So I want to make sure that the dipstick is just loosely sitting in there when I'm going to make a mark on this dipstick to determine my oil level. This will make a little bit more sense as I'm filling this up and showing you how much oil to put in. But for now, I'm going to look and see the level of oil the old differential had. And I'm going to make a mark right above this notch here on my dipstick. Alright, so there's my notch in my dipstick. Notice my dipstick is just setting down slightly, it's not screwed in. So when I'm checking my oil level, I want to make sure that that oil level gets to that marking, not above it, not below it, but just right there. And that should match the old oil level from the previous differential cover. Okay, so I'm about ready to put this on. I've got the lube blocker gasket on. You can see that it all lines up perfectly, and this is a dry fit gasket, so doesn't need to be wet. No seal needed. This is all you need. All the holes nicely line up. The lube blocker logo is pointed here to the right side. Notice my mark is ready to go. And as I'm bolting these down, there's a diagram of which bolt to do first. So remember, we're looking at it backwards right now. Once it's on, this is the logo that we'll be using. So this one right here is actually this bolt up here. And then we're going to be hand tightening these and then torquing them down to 25 foot-pounds. Okay, so I'm just going to want to take a towel and dry off the edge here. Just don't want any oil here. I just want this nice and dry for when we install this gasket. Okay, so I did have to bend this plastic piece up here, this connection, so that this new metal brake line bracket will fit in up here. Again, just hand tightening these Just getting them all in place before we start torquing them down. This kit does come with 2 different size bolts, one longer, one shorter. Shorter ones are going to go all around the bottom and the top, and then these longer ones are going to go in these thicker sections. There are 4 there. Okay, now that most of these are in, except these bigger ones, I'm going to start following this diagram and bolting them a little bit tighter. Not quite torquing all the way down, just following the diagram to make sure it's sealed correctly. Okay guys, I had to stop and because I was running into an issue. The bolts that came with the diff cover from ARB did not fit the differential housing. As soon as I tried to bolt it in, it would just stop. At first I thought maybe there was some anti-seize or something in there that was making it catch. I thought maybe I needed to tap the hole and make sure that maybe it was threaded correctly, but it was just not going at all, barely budging. And so I kind of opened this up and looked at the specifications for this M226. I made sure that I was sent the correct box, and there you see it's the M226 black. That's the correct product number. So I knew that, I thought everything that ARB sent me was correct. So then I thought, well, maybe the bolts are wrong. So I took the factory bolt that came with the rear diff on the factory, found that it is a 5/16 bolt. And what was ARB supposed to send me? 5/16 bolts. Well, here's the issue. When I would try to bolt them in here, I mean, it just stops, seizes up. I come over here to the 8mm and it bolts right in. So they sent me 8mm bolts and not 5/16 bolts, which is what I'm supposed to have. Then I looked through this box, or this packet, excuse me, and I see there's 8mm bolts supposed to come with the Jeeps. So what I think is that ARB, when packaging up this product, threw in the box of, or a bag of 8mm hardware instead of the 5/16 hardware. So I live in a really small town on the coast, and I was just praying. I was like, there's no way that the hardware store down the street has what I need. Sure enough, they have 5/16 bolts with the hex top there at 3/4 and 1.5 inch. So the local hardware store saved me. I'm hoping this will all work. It's not the black oxide coating, it's stainless steel. I've emailed Z1. They're pretty good about getting back and making things right. What I just didn't want is for my truck to just sit there until something could get shipped. I also didn't want to have to put the old cover back on and clean this thing all up and then fill it up with oil, then drain it again. I mean, this oil's close to $70 for the 3 bottles. So I'm hoping that these new bolts will work. Let's get to it. Okay, I tried to start all these and was getting some resistance, and I think that's because I messed up the threads when I was trying to screw in the bolts they gave me. So I rethread all these with the tap set, and then once I did that, all these went in easily. So if you get any resistance like I did when you're trying to bolt these, stop, double check you've got the right bolts. You don't want to mess up all these threads and spend another 30 minutes having to rethread everything. Don't forget to install this bracket up here on these top 2. That is for this brake line up here. And so we've got to bolt that back down. And then I'm going to plug this up with the plug, and it's got a magnetic tip, and start filling this with oil. Okay, all I did was just hand tighten these. I've seen where it needs to be tightened at 25 foot-pounds, but that's pretty much just really tightening them with the socket. I've got a torque wrench here that I can use, but my hex bolt won't fit on this 1/2-inch ratchet, or excuse me, torque wrench. So I just really hand tighten them hard. This one up here can be tightened up to 32 foot-pounds, and now I'm just torquing down this sway bar here. Okay, sway bar is connected. I torqued these down to 88 foot-pounds. I could not find a spec. If you know the spec, put it in the comments. That would be great. Or if it needs to be tighter, let me know quick so I can get down here, make sure my sway bar doesn't fall off while I'm driving. But 88 felt good. This would have been super easy had the correct bolts been sent in. Had a panic mode there, thinking I wasn't going to be able to drive my truck next week until some bolts came in, but you know, very fortunate. The hardware store close by had something. You know, it's not all blacked out. It's got the silver stainless steel bolts, but so is the ARB, kind of that brushed metal, so it all kind of works out. I ended up tightening the diff breather modification up here. I used a 12mm wrench. I just went a full clockwise turnaround. I'm hoping that's tight enough. I'm afraid that like if I keep bolting it down, it's gonna strip something or snap something, so I'll just keep an eye on that and tighten it as needed. But that's it, guys. Hopefully this helped you out. I would just check your bolts if you order from, I mean, this came from Z1. I can't believe they would package it. I think it just came straight from ARB through Z1, but check your bolts, make sure they're the right size before you remove your diff. That's my hard-earned lesson today, but I think it looks great. I don't see any leaking at all. So if this was helpful, feel free to like, please subscribe, and comment if you have any feedback or want to see something else installed. Till next time.